Hello, my name is Michael Johnson. This is Forge TV, and you're watching the SU Sports Officer Debate. Here with us today are Charlotte and Joe, your potential candidates. Now, I'm going to start with a question to both of you. What has your experience in club sport prepared you for this role? Charlotte, do you want to answer first?
Hi, so I've been involved in Sheffield University Rowing Club. I was a member of them for 2 years, and then I was a member of Shefski as well, and a member of Sheffield University Ladies Rugby Football Club. During my time, I've seen how different clubs have been kind of dealt with by the university, and I understand where kind of needs reframing, like more funding, and also in my time during uni, I've been on committees for those clubs. So I'm currently SULRC secretary, and that's really given me a great insight, because I mean, the amount that goes on, I think until you sit on a committee like that, you don't always fully comprehend how much goes into these clubs and how much work it is. But that's just a little overview of me in clubs.
Nice. Joe?
So in terms of club sport, I'm a fourth year student, and this is my fourth year. Well, obviously it's different with COVID, but playing for men's football, and from the off really, I was heavily involved. In my second year, I was on the committee. I was kit secretary. My third year, I was club secretary, and this year I'm second team captain, although hasn't really materialised very well with no bucks. But I think what is really I've experienced the problems that are related to sport with the uni. I mean, I've seen our facilities, and I've been away to Durham University, been away to Manchester University, and you just see how much better their facilities are, and it does make you realise that as a university, we're competing very well and we're succeeding, but we're not getting the same support that other universities are. And that's just something I've picked up from the start. But then also in my roles on a committee, I've learned so much just about sport, about the runnings of it, about the finances. And I've also built up a good network of friends in other sports as well. I mean, we're quite fortunate in football that we get to use the Goodwin facilities. I know a lot of other teams, they have to outsource their travel, which is a big issue, and I don't think that should be happening. So I've gained a great idea of where sport is, and a great idea of where I want sport to be.
Nice. So you mentioned travel there, so I'm going to go to Charlotte. What is the issue with Norton travel, and how will you plan on fixing it?
Yeah, so I would also like to say that when I mention Norton, I don't want to just specify Norton, because there are so many different facilities around Sheffield that people have to get travel to. And I know this has been spoken about before, but there are some plans currently as to how we can for this. So work with different travel providers, and which would include viewing taxi travellers, car sharing, and the aim of that would be to eliminate car travel to training in the city, which I think is a great idea. And I know this may take some time to implement though, so I would, if it couldn't be enacted quick enough for when if I went into office, because I know it's the first quarter for funding to kind of be allocated, I would like to push for there to be a pot to be set up, because there's a lot of students that are having to put a lot of money into fuel to drive to different facilities. So a bit like how this year you could send off forms when basically all sport got cancelled, you could send off forms and say how much your club has spent and get reimbursement. So it would be similar to that, and those drivers could send off and say pretty much how much it's going to cost them in fuel and expenses. But ideally I'd want to set up the taxi idea, but if I couldn't implement it that fast, because I don't want to just kind of promise things and then I can't always fulfill them, that would be another one.
Nice. So Joe, in your manifesto, you mentioned about the sports facilities being quite lacking, and you said just there. But I wanted to ask, coming out of a global pandemic, which has undoubtedly caused the university to rethink its budgeting, do you think lobbying for a new multi-purpose sports facility is really the right thing to spend time on if you are the Wellbeing and Sports Officer?
Yeah, well, I completely understand why people might view it that way and see it that way, but this isn't like a short-term thing. This isn't I'm expecting the uni to turn around and say, right, we'll build it immediately. Obviously, they've got the social sciences building that they're currently working on. That obviously took away from our sports facilities. I think it's more of a long-term thing. So I think hopefully this pandemic should be over soon, or it should be a lot better soon. And I'm really hoping that in the long term, this is something that will not just benefit students coming in the next couple of years, but people coming in the next 30, 40 years, because quite simply, the facilities can't go on how they are at the moment because they're not quite up to standard. And I think also, just drawing on that as well, I think it is a big issue that people do undervalue sport at the university. I mean, for me, for loads of people, it's a massive part of university, not just in the sense of meeting people, but in the sense of well-being. And it's important. I think the pandemic's emphasised just how important physical and mental well-being is. I think there's a time when the university should be paying attention to sport and starting investing in sport. It's now. So yeah, I completely understand reservations, but I do feel like it's a long-term project. It's not something that should be too costly in terms of, in the short term. It will more likely be the next project in a sense.
Nice. Charlotte, I'm going to go back to you. How are you going to plan to make sure every single undergraduate and postgraduate student will be able to participate in sports on a Wednesday afternoon? Because obviously that's a lot of people.
Yeah, so when I've said that I want students to have Wednesday afternoons free, I've put the student sport and other activities. I don't mean just necessarily sport, because I know, as much as I love sport, I know it's not for everyone, and there's like a wealth of societies that everyone would want to get involved in. So it's not just for students to participate in sport. It's more of a recognition that we're not just here, well, primarily we're here for academia, but then we need some time outside of that so that we can kind of, I was going to say, well, function, but make sure that our mental health stays okay, because by having Wednesday afternoons free, I think it just gives that type of message to students that the uni does care and does want the students' well-being to be thought about. It would also, I'd really like to the aim of this, it could tackle isolation, anxiety and low mood, and we could work alongside uni health services and counselling services, and it would create a space and time for people to kind of get involved with those things, because some courses are so heavy that the times that you may go for counselling might not be facilitated then, so then you wouldn't be able to do it, and it kind of just inhibits people's opportunity to do that. I hope that answered my question.
Yeah, that's good. So Joe, other than reduction in single-use plastics, what policies would you enact in order to make varsity more sustainable?
Yeah, it's a great question. As I said, obviously in my manifesto, I talk about starting with single-use plastics. I feel like that's the biggest priority in terms of making varsity more sustainable. And it would be the biggest change, but I do feel like there is other things, smaller changes, but can still be significant. So for example, with paper tickets, changing that to electronic, and just looking at small changes like that can help in the grand scheme of things. But the main thing is, yeah, plastic reduction. So yeah.
So this will be a question for both of you. I'll start with Joe this time. So for varsity to go ahead next year, so varsity is a big part of like the SU sports officer's role. Next year, it will be first, second and third years that would never experienced it. What will you do as sport officer to make it a great experience for all the students? You can
Yeah, I think, no, sorry, yes. No, I think that's a really good point. I think it's going to be a massive challenge, not just for whoever is wellbeing and sport officer, but for each individual club committee. I know there'll be empty committees likely this year, or there'll be committees of people who haven't quite experienced club sport to the full extent yet. So it's really important that the people who have been here, so like myself, if I get in the role of, that will be my 5th year in Sheffield, and I know exactly what a varsity is about. So I think it's about encouraging people who are in every single team, on committees, or even if people don't want to be on committee but just a member of a club, to really emphasize to all the other students who haven't had that pleasure of experience of varsity just how important it is. I mean, there's a lot of content available showing some of the scenes from varsities in previous years, and I think promoting that and really showing to people, like, I think me personally in my first year, when I turned up to a few of the events and you've got thousands of people, I was like, wow, like this is big. I didn't even realize how big it was until I went there myself. So I think just getting that across to people and really emphasizing how big it is and how important it is that we win varsity again, because like, as you said, it's one of the highlights of the year. So hopefully, and I'm sure it will continue.
Charlotte, same question.
Yeah, so I feel like Joe has said quite a lot of what I probably had said. So just to add on that, yeah, I think it's one of the things which almost helps people get through some of the kind of hard times during uni, because you're just looking forward to varsity. And I think one of the things that we've done, we shared like the para sport video, which has some great content on, and like Joe said, there's some great content out there from varsity, and if we just get that out and publicize it so people can see and kind of get a sense, like a feeling of how big varsity is and how fun it is, and how important, like, varsity was something which for me in my first year with rowing, it meant that it was like something to strive for as well. And I think if you just kind of get that sense back into students that it's something to be proud of and kind of almost fight for when you're training, I think it will get a sense to students that it is definitely worthwhile. And I think at the moment we've been inside for so long, everyone's just going to be excited to do anything. So I don't know how hard it would be to get people to be excited to do something. But yeah, I think Joe answered that well as well. I think I think it's covered everything.
That's nice. So I'm going to ask another group question. So you both come from 2 largish clubs. How do you plan on representing the smaller clubs which may have been severely affected by COVID, where they might be struggling to get executive committee members because there haven't been the training session? And yeah, so Charlotte.
Yeah, so something that was actually brought to me recently was the fact that not even all clubs that societies are able to become clubs that want to be clubs, and I think that in itself isn't fair. So for instance, Pole Fitness Society, they would like to be a club but currently aren't, and one of the things that sometimes prevents clubs being able to become clubs at Sheffield rather than a society is numbers. And I think by putting a amount of committee as a kind of a benchmark for a club to exist is like in itself quite exclusionary, because it will just prevent new sports being able to be played, and I think it's not really fair for those sports. I think also we'd need to push through the Give It a Go program, because that's when people get to try all these new sports which they may never have before. And I think it's hard because, especially this year, I think it's been even harder, because when you go to uni, you will try sports that you may not have even thought about or knew about. And the fact that we haven't been able to kind of see these sports or do anything has made that harder, but I think by implementing a quite active Give It a Go programme would ensure that these smaller clubs get some more exposure so that they can keep going.
Nice. Joe, same question.
Yeah, so I think that's obviously a massive challenge. And I think two things are crucial. I think firstly, obviously, members of sports committee each have their clubs that they sort of look after. So it'd be a lot about helping them within and delegating, and also essentially so there's more focus rather than one person dealing with every single club. It's not achievable. I think making sure giving the committee the support so that they can support these clubs that might struggle. And I think the second thing is quite important is also outgoing members. I mean, your love for sport in Sheffield doesn't end just because your degree does. And I think me personally, and a lot of people I know, as soon as I'm finished university or I'm not in Sheffield anymore, if someone does need some help with anything related to sport, I'm more than happy to help them with that. So I think it'd be really useful to encourage members of clubs to, if they do need help in or they do need advice on certain things, to reach out to people who are leaving, because just because you've left university doesn't mean you can't communicate with people from the uni anymore and give help. And I think also secondly, what Charlotte touched upon, the give it a go, is I think is crucial. And I think we'll see when normality returns what the effect of the pandemic on our sort of crucial social sport and give it a go sessions. But I definitely think that needs a lot of work. And we need to put a lot of effort into encouraging people to try things for the first time, so that these clubs that are brilliant get the people that they deserve, and people do start engaging in sport in various different ways and various different sessions. So yeah.
Oh, nice. Charlotte, what are your ideas for sustainability in sport next year?
So I've got a few ideas for sustainability in sport. So I've already started talking to certain some people on sustainability kind of fronts, and I'd really like to implement some sort of sustainability training for clubs. We've done some amazing work this year on getting training out to clubs, but I think sustainability is something which isn't really ever on clubs' agendas at all. So I'd like to implement that, and then also in relation to that, I'd really like to implement an award at Sports Awards for the club that shows that they've kind of tried the hardest to practice sustainable measures, and that will, I think, make clubs strive to be more sustainable. Because I think sometimes it's hard because clubs don't really see what they'll gain from it. And then also with stash, I think that's something we need to address, because people will just buy stash each year. And then like they might buy one fleece and then buy another one just to get it engraved. Great. So it's stitched in.
Yeah.
And I think one policy I'd love to start is a stash / like swap shop in the SU, so that students can kind of just get a stash which graduating students or people that might just not be using it anymore aren't using, they could sell it on and just like donate it. I also, sorry, I had an idea after seeing Joe your point about varsity. So actually I've got it. I didn't plan this. You can get like hard cups like that. So for varsity, if we got these and you pay like £1 for them, and I feel like that's the type of thing that people would really like, and then it's not single-use plastic, so it goes with Joe's point about varsity. I thought it was good.
No, that's cool. Yeah. Joe, where do you envisage the funding to come from for the subsidised gym memberships for all club sport members? Will it be a part of initial registration fee for the club, or do you have any other ideas where this loss might be made up?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of it's got to come back to what we're saying about the university investing in sport and recognizing the importance of mental and physical well-being. And the exact finances for that now, it's impossible to say because I'm not there. I haven't got a spreadsheet in front of me, but I think it can certainly be the case that maybe a small amount comes from club contributions, and then it's about convincing the university that this is something that we need. Because I think you get a lot of students where it's either one or the other. The gym is quite expensive, but they want to participate in sport, so it's quite tough. So I think it's about persuading the university that that's where it needs to be funded and getting some funding from them. And then if it is the case where to get a bit more of a discount, we need to get clubs contributing through membership, I'm sure that wouldn't be a problem.
Charlotte, in what ways do you aim to promote the importance of mental health in student sport and the wider sporting community?
So with regards to mental well-being, I've experienced firsthand kind of the state that it's in. Like when I signed up to student access to mental health services, it took a month to be seen, and then when I was told they didn't have the facilities to deal with me, which I don't think any student should be in that situation. I've already tried quite hard this year, and Sportscom has as well, to kind of push out mental health campaigns and just make sure that resources are easily available. I put together a mental health resource guide, which I've also linked on my like Charlotte for Sport, but with regards to what I'd like to do, so one thing which I think would be like immeasurable would be to start mental health first aiding and open that up to committee members and also staff, because I think a lot of the time staff might not have the necessary kind of knowledge to deal with students and might not understand their situation, and just ultimately more needs to be invested because the wait time's way too long. I think I'm lucky that I've got a lot of support around me, but yeah, I don't care where the money's coming from, but more money needs to be invested into our mental health services because it's not okay.
Joe, this will be a very similar question. You mentioned about improving accessibilities to mental health services. How would you go about doing this?
Yeah, so I think at the moment, I mean, in the last few years, there's been a great deal of work done, and it's really good that we're getting to a point now where it's the normal now for people to reach out if they need help. But I think at the moment, often you get an email, not many people read their every single email that they get, which is just a sort of template, and it's not very welcoming. I think I know obviously the university does as much as it can, but there's nothing quite like speaking to people. So I think what's really important in improving accessibility to mental health services is getting the knowledge out there. I think whenever anyone has something going wrong in their life, however bad it is or however little it is or however big it is, the first person the first group of people you turn to is your friends. So I think it's about extending that learning and sort of informing people of what should be the protocol if something doesn't seem right or if they feel like something needs to be done. So I think extending education on mental health, not just to all committee members, but trying to encourage committee members to pass on this knowledge to all members, and even outside of sport, to be honest, just ensuring that as many people as possible know what should be done, so that when people do find themselves in a position where they do need help, they're not sort of just isolated and alone. They've got their friends saying, well, yeah, you need to reach out to this service, or you need to sign up here. So I think that's the biggest thing about improving accessibility.
Nice. So this will be your last question. It'll be for both of you. Why should the students of Sheffield vote for you as their Wellbeing and Sports Officer? Charlotte, is it okay if you go first?
Yeah. I don't really like selling myself, but I'll give it a go. I think I've had 5 years of experience in Sheffield within I think, well, anyone that knows me knows that I am just very, very dedicated to helping anyone. I think anyone that will ask, I'll try and help. I've also learned a lot this year on sports committee, and just how much goes into like each campaign, and the work that goes on behind the scenes to facilitate all these campaigns, which I think will help me in the role, because I've got quite an understanding which I didn't have before. And I'm just very passionate about all sports, I think.
Yeah.
I'll let Joe go.
I'll pass over to Joe just because I wanted to bring that.
Likewise, I don't like selling myself, but I just think, to be honest, my university experience has revolved around sport, whether that be club sport, campus leagues, going to the gym. So I do understand a lot of what needs to be done, and I'm passionate about it as well, about sport and wellbeing, because it's two things that go hand in hand really, and they've been crucial in my university experience. So I feel like I do have a very good understanding. And then I think now it's a time when, as I said earlier, someone needs to go in and tell the uni, look, the pandemic's shown just how important mental and physical health is. You need to start investing in this. And I feel like I'm that person who's passionate, who will go in there and tell the university how it is, and tell them that this is what needs to be done. Tell them if something's wrong. Tell them if something needs to be improved. So I think that's why I believe that I'll be best suited to the role.
Nice, thank you. So these have been your Wellbeing and Sport Officer candidates. Back to the pundits. Yeah, that's great, guys. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Iwan James, and welcome to a punditry for the Sports and Wellbeing SU Officer role. We've just had the debates, and now we're going in depth into the candidates' policies. And today joined by Harry, Ciara, and Rory. Hi all. So first question is, just how important will the two candidates' experiences in club sport be to the position with spending multiple years on the club's committees? Harry, I'll go to you first.
I think it's quite clear that having experience in sports committees is important to the sports officer role. It's in every single sports officer we've seen since I've been at the university, which is only for 2 years. So Matt Graves and then Sarah Morse the year before. Both of them had extensive backgrounds in club sport at the university. And so it clearly does make, it's massively key for anyone who wants to run for the role.
Yep, definitely. Ciara?
Yeah, I think it's definitely key. And that was really evident in both candidates. Both Charlotte, she said that she had 5 years of sport experience in Sheffield, numerous roles in both societies and committees, such as the current secretary for the ladies rugby team. And I think both of these candidates said that their experiences made them understand how clubs and societies work, and how that's vital to understand how they work. And when it comes to that leadership level, that would be key.
And finally, Rory, your opinion?
Yeah, just echoing the comments really of the other two guys. I mean, I don't think you can really underestimate the importance that sport has in any university, but particularly here, we place so much weight on it. And I think it's interesting as well this year that, you know, it's not simply a sports role, but also a wellbeing one. And, you know, if the last few months has taught us anything, it's that people's mental health, you know, has got to come at the forefront of everything that we do now. And I think, you know, both candidates really hit home with that during this debate as well.
So yeah, as Rory just said, this year the wellbeing has been added to the sports officer role. So how important, how has actually is referendum?
I'm so sorry, that question broke up a little bit there.
Oh, sorry, yeah, okay. So I was just saying that after Rory's point about the wellbeing added to this year's referendum and to the officer role, important and how essential has it been for the candidates to adapt to well-being as well as sport in this role this year?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that they've put wellbeing attached to this role. I think last year that we saw that mental health came to the forefront of a lot of the both Jordan and Matt's campaigns, and we were quite. It was really like great for the candidates to actually come out and say that they had experiences in mental service and how these experiences have just sort of shown how vital sport can be to well-being, and that's definitely reflected in some of the candidates' policies, such as Wednesdays afternoons off for sport and well-being, and keeping that open to make sure that well-being is an essential part of this role.
Yep. Rory, would you like to add to your point from earlier?
Yeah, just to continue really with this idea of well-being, and okay, those of us who maybe in the past weren't as inclined to go out and go out on a run, for example, or try some home exercise. We've seen it infamously with Joe Wicks and the likes, how much it's meant to young people in society. But let's not get away from the fact that adults as well, struggle just as much and sometimes even more with their mental health. And I think with the correct candidate this year, listen, Matt Graves is going to be a difficult act to follow. I thought he did a formidable job really in bringing the uni community together in difficult circumstances as well, it must be said. But certainly mental health and sport, as far as I can see, are two concepts that go hand in hand. And I think that makes for a perfect position really going forward.
Yep, definitely. Matt's obviously had such a great influence this year, and as Rory said, it's going to be a hard act to follow. So Harry, is there any other things that you might add on to the wellbeing aspect of this role?
I do have to echo what Rory said about the great job that Matt Graves has done this year, and the tough act it will be to follow, because I've worked very closely with Matt Graves throughout this year, both on coverage of his plans for the year and also his column that he started doing for Forge Sport and Forge Press that outlined his work this year, and he has done a fantastic job, and it will be a tough act to follow. I felt it is obviously very important to start addressing the mental health side of student life, as well as involving it in sport, because it is a difficult, a lot of stigma surrounding a lot of different things in sport, mental health being one of them. It's difficult to talk about stuff like that when you're in an environment of, particularly in men's sport, big tough guys, and it's difficult to talk about stuff like that. I did feel that in the debate that both candidates didn't really seem to have something for that side of the officer role. I think they were both very suited to the sports side, but I felt what they were saying about the well-being side of their new role was very much, it lacked substance. For example, there was one of them said that there needs to be more money for mental health, but I don't know where it's going to come from, but it needs to be there. And I just didn't think that was suitable. You need to know what you're going to do and where you're going to take that money from, where you're going to take money from to fund the mental health side. So I think it'll be interesting to see how they both, how either of them adapt to that and take, by the horns, that side of the officer role, because it's not something that I think, unfortunately, either of them were particularly knowledgeable on in doing their debate.
So in terms of policies, we'll go into the individuals now. And I'd say that one of the main ones that Joe presented was how, despite the sporting quality in the university itself, there's been a sort of divide between the quality as well as the facility quality available to them. So he mentioned how Manchester University, for example, they've got some great facilities. So he questioned why hasn't the University of Sheffield done the same? And one of his policies was about a overhaul of campus facilities. So my question is, how can Joe be the man to lead that long-term project into sporting facilities in the University of Sheffield? Rory, I'll start with you.
Well, obviously facilities are such a big part of what makes a sporting department. And I think we're fortunate here in Sheffield to have some top class, even world class facilities at our disposal. whether that be the two football grounds, EIS further out in the city, Ponsforge is somewhere else I think that has been used on occasion by the uni and hopefully continue to be used in that respect. But he talks about trying to create this level playing field, I guess, between ourselves and maybe other unis in the north. I think that's something that realistically can only come around through increased funding. And if there's one thing that this period has taught us, it's that funding is quite hard to come by and needs to be used in the correct ways. So I think he'll have a task on his hands, to put it bluntly. Whether or not that's something that he manages to rise to, I suppose only time will tell.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you can see with the current pandemic and stuff like that, how big budget cuts have been for the university. So Harry, how would you see, following on from Rory's point, how would you see if Joe could be able to actually get the funding available for this multi-purpose expansion sort of thing? Can you see that being possible with the university as it stands right now?
I think, I do believe anything's possible. He could do it if he puts, the time and effort into lobbying the university for this new facilities. I do believe it was this policy that he said, this isn't something that he's going to be able to do in the 1 year. He's setting long-term plans with it, and he may well spend his entire year in office lobbying for the funds to be able to kickstart this for future officers to continue it on and carry it out so that we get new, better state-of-the-art facilities. I do think that the facilities we do have, as Rory has mentioned, are good. They are good, especially the ones that aren't necessarily uni-owned, but within Sheffield that we can use. Goodwin Sports Centre could use an upgrade. But again, it's something that it's a long-term plan that he's going to have to spend most of his term in office if he wins, kick-starting, let alone completing.
Yeah, definitely. And so, Ciara, would you say that Charlotte may have the qualities that can sort of develop this idea in a way as well, if she was to go for this route of extra funding from the university and sort of developing the sports facilities available, or would this be more for Joe's sort of stance?
It's interesting you say that. Echoing what Harry said, I definitely feel like Joe's idea of getting new facilities is a long-term plan, and that is very much about lobbying, and it's about for the future rather than for the current. And I do feel like Charlotte had more focus on the short term and the now, which is hoping that we can get in the door with sport and focusing on travel. So what we have now, students can actually get to. So I quite like that idea of being able to actually just focus on what we have at the meantime, and hopefully carry on with this lobbying as more of a long-term solution. And I do feel like both of these candidates can do that, but it is interesting to note that I think there was more emphasis on the now with Charlotte.
Yeah, no, well, my next point was about Charlotte's manifesto, and the main point that stood out to me personally was how she wants to make it more accessible, sport as a whole, with subsidising Norton travel, as well as lobbying for Wednesday afternoons to be completely free of scheduled teaching. And she said obviously about the mental health aspect and how important it is for people to have that break. So my question is, how significant would this be for getting students of all ages into sports, both familiar and new, realistically? So, Ciara, if you want to start off the debate.
Yeah, sure. I do feel like this is a really important point, and I do feel like she worked on that in several aspects. So, for example, the travel plans, which is to encourage like existing students to be able to continue going to where they do their sport. Also, I think this Wednesday afternoon off for sport and wellbeing would be a good way to get students in the door to do this sport if they do have this time to do so. And yeah, I think mental health definitely was quite a key part of what she had to say during the debate, talking about how she's been let down by the mental health services that we currently have. And she actually took the time to do a mental health guide, which you can access, which I thought was really nice. And I think that shows that she is dedicated to making this well-being difference. So I thought that was a really nice combination, in my opinion.
Yep. From Rory or Harry now, have either of you had a time when you've wanted to access sport, but it may not been accessible in terms of it was slightly expensive, it was not feasible to do? Have either of you experienced that?
I can jump in on that. I think it's interesting that Charlotte, refers to travel. because I think it's maybe taken for granted, or it is taken for granted, just getting from A to B. And the fact that the uni do base themselves somewhere which is just that little bit further away, and it acts as a barrier, I think, for a lot of people, particularly ones who maybe don't have a car at university. It isn't the norm, I don't think, to have your own personal vehicle at uni with you. And if you are one of those privileged few that does, then that's all well and good. But certainly it can act as a barrier, and that's something that we want to be, avoiding. Because I think the idea, whether or not it's I'm inclined to say unrealistic. I think university by default is something that you're given the option. Nothing is forced upon you. So to say that everyone should or could potentially be involved in a Wednesday afternoon sport of some description, I think that really is down to the individual. But it's an incentive, I think, that it would be difficult to criticise with the correct transport means, and if that means subsidising travel, things like team buses, I'm sure that will be something that she'll look into in time. But I think it can only be a good thing.
Yeah. Once again, the issue of pandemic sort of cost cuts come into this in terms of subsidising travel and stuff like that. And considering this was also a policy that Matt Graves was very interested in sort of bringing in, why is this different to what he brought in for Charlotte's point? Harry, what do you think of that?
Well, I think Matt Graves has had the difficulty of trying to implement some policies that would have been something he could have maybe very easily implemented without COVID. He's had the difficult task of trying to implement them during a pandemic, which isn't entirely possible, particularly when it relates to travel. For Charlotte, if she wanted to do something similar, or Joe as well, if he decided to do that, they have the advantage, and the key difference would be that people are more likely to be doing sports by the time they take office. That we are hopefully in the UK wrapping up this pandemic over the course of the rest of this year, and so by the time we are fully in full swing for the 2021-22 academic year, we could be seeing people needing to travel to the Norton facilities, or to Goodwin if it's a long way from where they are staying, if they live somewhere else in Sheffield. And it will be easier and more accessible, and there'll be more demand for it because people are actually going places.
Yeah, no, massively. And going on to the next point in terms of going places, hopefully by the time we return next year, we'll have a full-on varsity, which obviously is a highlight of many people's years, and it's incredibly important for the university experience, as well as the mental health related issues, and of course getting one over on Hallam. But when it comes to the policies that they're implementing, how important do you think it is that they actually achieve this through their policies of, for example, policy of the green varsity, of trying to get more sustainable? If I come to you first, Harry.
I don't quite understand the question. Maybe just because I'm a Muppet, but I don't quite understand the question, so apologies.
No, yeah, it was just about saying essential will it be when it comes to varsity to ensure that their policies are implemented correctly in terms of the green policy for Joe, as well as making sure that all the students who have not so far been able to access it or being able to actually experience it, how important will it be to actually be able to implement the policy, so to say?
Yeah, no, apologies. I do get it now. Varsity and implementing their policies around varsity and organising a good varsity is crucial for next year. As I believe it was mentioned by the presenter in the debates, this will be the first varsity for every single student at the university, or undergraduate student at the university, the first varsity they would have experienced. And so getting that right and putting on a good show is important. But then also in terms of the sustainability side of it, also very important. I think it was Charlotte mentioned having non-plastic waste like drinking utensils and cups and bottles on sale, which I think is a great idea. It's going to raise more money, of course, for future endeavours in terms of sports, but then also it's going to mean we're not leaving plastic cups at every single ground we use, which is, you know, better for the environment itself. So I think it's crucial they get it right. I'd like to think it will, well, I wouldn't like to think it will be difficult, but I do think it will be difficult too. But I do think it is crucial that they do get it right and do put on a good show.
Yeah, and in terms of sort of actually implementing it and being the manifesto, do you think it's more a footnote and that it's just something that's a sort of passing comment, or do you think it's actually quite dedicated towards, like, what's your opinion on this, Rory?
Well, in Joe's manifesto, he specifically refers to wanting to stamp out single-use plastic, you know, which is sort of a phenomenon that it's not just a phenomenon that we're seeing in uni, but it's something that, which I think across the board we're trying to obviously improve. And we're not there yet, and we probably won't be there for quite a while. Whether or not it's a passing comment, I mean, listen, it's probably not top of your agenda when you're talking about sport and putting on a show like Harry, to use a phrase that Harry has used. People are gutted at the fact that varsity has had to end like this, and particularly those maybe in the younger year groups who haven't quite been able to experience it, and they may have read and seen and watched it, because there's no two ways about it. It's huge for so many people, and that not just in a participation sense, but in terms of going along and being part of it. I know Forge offer lots of opportunities. That was a shameless plug, but yeah. So I think from the point of view of plastic and waste, it's something which is quite easily achievable. You know, how many people own a water bottle or something that can be refilled? You know, the supermarkets themselves are making a conscious effort. They have some way to go yet. But I think it's, you know, again, much like with everything else in these elections, it's the individuals who can force change. And until individuals themselves are prepared to change their habits, then we might not see too much movement on that yet.
Yeah, definitely. And finally, Ciara, in terms of with what Rory was saying about how Joe was looking into the sustainable varsity, as well as being more green with what his policies sort of say, how do you think Charlotte has approached that in terms of within her manifesto and debate as well?
I think a lot of her idea about sustainability, it came in the form of training groups to be more sustainable, like clubs. And also, I really love the idea of making a sustainable award for the sports award to give that incentive. I think both Charlotte and Joe, I love the idea of getting rid of reusable cups, and Charlotte kind of expanded on that in the debate and actually brought out her own reusable cup. And that kind of gave the idea, well, you know, I was thinking that you could literally capitalize on that and make varsity merch with those reusable cups, take them along to events and get them filled up. And that way you're being sustainable, but also making a few quid too. So it's kind of like a nice way of incorporating that. So I thought that was really good. And I think, again, both of them could easily smash that goal of being more sustainable in sport.
So thank you very much to my three guests, Ciara, Rory and Harry. We're now going back to the studio where Michael Johnson is with the Activities and Development Officers for 2020-21.
Hello, my name is Michael Johnson. This is Forge TV. And now we have your Activities and Development Officer debate. Here we've got with us Morgan and Ciaran. So to start off, I'm going to start with a question to both of you. Now, this has previously been two roles, activities and development. How do you believe you can represent both roles? Morgan.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Michael, for introducing us. It's really, really lovely to be here. So I am really, really excited to see that this role has come into shape with activities and merging development in terms of SU Treasurer and the financial management of the Students' Union. As your Society's Councillor, I was really, really fortunate to be involved in the decision-making and debating process for this. And I really think that merging these two elements of what we can have in a students' union is absolutely perfect. So by representing activities, the perfect way forward with this is obviously to keep representing our societies, our student groups, and everything that our students work so hard for in the students' union. We can really bring the development aspect into that as well, because a lot of the money which the previous development officer has been managing has been student-led budget. And the majority of our student-led budget goes into activities, and quite rightly so, because these are what really, really impact our students. So in terms of representing both as well, not only do we have the financial management of development, but also this is encompassing skills and employability. And I am really, really excited that this role is putting employability and skills at the forefront of something which we see as so integral in our community as activities. So I do believe that I'd be a really, really good candidate to represent both activities and development from my own experience outside of university, as well as the love and passion I truly have for our students' union.
Nice. Ciaran, same question.
Thanks for introducing me as well, and thanks for hosting us. Basically, I think it makes sense to combine the lead officer on the student activities with the finance, as they both have the most informed perspective within the team on the student budget. I really think that it's important to make sure that we represent the interests of the students and on a range of student-led activities, and to have really high oversight over the SU social enterprise activities and the performance. And I just think it's just sorry.
Don't worry.
Just those the two leading roles on the SU officer council and not the council officers, and it's really important that they're combined. I just think like having someone who deals with the finances as well as the activities finances, it just makes sense to combine them. I think I'd be a really good candidate because like I've experienced these within the society that I've been in, and I've been following the SU for the past year, and I think it's really been struggling with the finances, and I just want to help the SU get back on its feet.
Nice. Talk about finances and stuff like that. Morgan, how are you going to make communications over budget spending more transparent?
Yes, so this is under my first manifesto point of reforming the SU funding and finances. I am really, really fortunate. As your Societies Committee Treasurer, I have already worked intensely with the Students' Union to develop a very, very sound understanding of how the finance and funding system works, in particular for our student groups, which is where the impact is really needed. In terms of making this more transparent, I plan to have an officer who is very open about everything that is going on. And to do this, to make a transparent spending, I would really want students involved in terms of deciding the priorities of SU funding and finance spending. So something that I'm really, really keen to incorporate in terms of making the budget more transparent is giving students the options of suggesting local organisations and charities that our SU should invest in. And I really think that by giving students the option, I think this is just something that's really integral, because any decisions in our students' union that affect our students, I truly believe students should be involved in the decision-making process for. Completely understand this year that COVID has unfortunately hampered how our students' union has been able to operate in normal times. But given that we are now coming out of a time of real uncertainty, especially with COVID, one thing that I truly think will help students feel more secure about knowing where their money is going is to give completely transparent communications, probably through monthly updates as well. As the Activities and Development Officer, it would be the ideal person and connecting point to get in contact with societies about knowing where their money is going and actually how their money that they're paying towards the university is helping our students' union to really make their mark in the community and help those in need.
Nice. Ciaran, you have proposed to create a fund specifically for new societies to be set up. How would this be different from the current funding system in place for new societies?
So the current funding system, it's good and it gives enough money, I think, but that's regular times. And the amount of societies this year that have been turned away is frankly quite abhorrent, because like if you have and in a time when we really need to come together, it's just a shame that that's not happened. So I want to give the incentive of a higher, like I want to increase it and use the money that we get, like hot starters can happen. Something through next year, and we're not going to be able to do with it. So I think it's like the big dogs upstairs. I think we just give give it back to the students and make sure that they're like included.
Ciaran, could you just say that last sentence again? I don't know if it was just mine, but I think you were breaking up a little bit. So could you say that last sentence again? Sorry about that.
Do you know where it broke up from? The last sentence, sorry. I think, yeah, my internet's going a bit. Yeah, so basically,
no, sorry, we mucked you out. You can start from wherever.
Yeah. Sorry, this is so bad. My internet is terrible at the moment. So basically, yeah, we do have a societies fund already, but I do want to have a higher one. I want to increase the budget for it through using the money that like we get through art and all these other things, and keep it back to the activities and the societies, because they're the ones who are going to make that money. They're the ones going to Pop-Tarts. They're the ones who deserve to get to use it. And like, if you have an idea, you should get to have it. You should get to like at least try it out, because if we don't let them try it out and we don't like try and diversify our ice cream more,
So I'm actually the treasurer for Societies Committee, so it is my job to oversee, as the student, to oversee the funding pots for societies. You suggested that societies have been turned away. If this is in relation to funding, communications have been very good, and by all means, we do promote already in SEF. Societies Extra Fund is the extra fund, but actually we already have a New Ideas Fund. This is for an elevated amount higher than our Societies Extra Fund. Any society and medical society can apply for it as well. So I'm also struggling to see how what you're looking at is different to what SOCCOM already do very, very successfully, and what they already do to support students.
That's a good rebuttal, to be fair. So yeah, I understand that that's the case. Obviously, like I'm chair of ChemSoc, and I helped the Chemistry Postgrad Society actually set up their, like, it's a little too late. And like, I'm not being funny, but there were so many societies turned away. I literally had to help Chemistry Postgrad Society set up the department. And so they didn't get the right support that they needed, and they didn't get that support, the hands-on support that was like required. And I just think that in terms of society funds, there's more money that can be given. The New Ideas Fund is a good idea, but that's more for like, that's more for existing societies. I don't think it's been promoted that way towards us, like the society members.
Morgan, you have something to say?
Thank you. Yeah, so in terms of SU funding, what currently happens is only existing societies, and this includes new societies as well, are eligible for funds. As part of what I'm looking to do in my manifesto, I would like to reform the SU funding to make sure that this reaches groups as well. So we understand that there are groups who are really passionate about areas in our students' union that might not constitute a society as well. So that is a different matter. But in terms of reassuring people that actually, as a member of Societies Committee and the treasurer on that, if you've got any queries about why you've been turned away, this is effectively saying that you believe our students are currently not doing a good enough job at supporting other students with funding pots that have been set up specifically to promote our societies. Our Students' Union is a really positive place, and I truly believe that everything our Students' Union does is to encompass and empower students. So coming into it with the attitude of they just get turned away all the time, I can understand from your personal experience, but looking at the wider picture as well, it's really important to know that there is so much more that we can do, both as candidates here, without bashing the current system and hard work of the officers and students that are actually working really, really hard already. I completely get if that's not what you were trying to get across, but that's just how it's come across to me.
No, yeah. I'm not bashing anybody. Like, I'm sorry if I implied that SOCCOM hasn't done enough. I'm genuinely not trying to attack anybody. It's just been my lived experience. Like, and I put a lot of effort into helping become a mental society, and I don't think anybody should have had to go through that much effort, like, and that much like struggle. Like, they were constantly emailing people. They were trying to get support. They really struggled, and I just don't think a society should have to go through that to get their ideas across.
Okay, I'm going to just for now, I'm going to go on to another question so we get a few more questions through. So Morgan, how are you proposing to bring student voices centrally education and leadership training? Are the current schemes for student voices to be expressed not sufficient?
This is a really, really interesting question, and I'm really, really glad that you've brought it to us today. So I have been looking into what 301 offer, as well as Career Connect, and what can be eligible for here. But the reason I put this on my manifesto is because this is really underpinning the morals that I have about the fact that any decision taken in our students' union should massively incorporate what students need. Our world is a massively changing place. And as we can see with COVID as well, the needs and demands of students have changed. And this includes differences in skills. This includes the fact that our students have not had the access to opportunities that they would have in normal times. Now, I speak about this for this year. I've been a student here this year. Although I was on my year abroad last year, I also know that this is something that has affected students who are in our students' union for more than a year. So for some students, the majority of their university experience, they have not had the same access to skills and education and leadership training that they would normally have for a face-to-face experience in our students' union. So the reason I really want to bring student voices centrally to this is because our world is changing. We are the ones who are going to be facing the graduate world of employment. We are the ones who are going to be at the forefront of working out what employers need and actually what we need to develop as well. I am a key believer in giving students the opportunities to empower their futures, giving all of the support that they need to make these decisions for themselves and realize their full potentials. So I would love to bring student voices centrally to anything that we do in terms of education and leadership training in particular, because I truly think this is something that any student can benefit from. And especially if we make it in a way which is especially inclusive to liberation groups and international students, I truly think that we can make such an amazing collaborative project on working in education and leadership.
Nice, nice. So, Ciaran, with a busy annual events calendar as it is, how are you going to increase the number of SU-hosted job affairs?
So I understand that obviously it is a very busy calendar and it's difficult to fit them in, but I think I would work with the SU staff and just try and get them there, because at the end of the day, job fairs are the leading way of, like, there's such a good, well, maybe not the leading way, but there's such a good way of getting a job and getting like hands-on, like actually being able to talk with someone who's worked there. Like, so like people like me who, like, my parents are teachers, so I eventually want to go into the chemical industry as I'm a chemist, but I have no way of getting in there and I have no one to check my CV and other things like this and other, it's just very difficult to actually talk to someone who's experienced that. And I think a lot of people, especially people who come from lower income backgrounds, will also experience this. So I think even though it would be difficult, it's just something I want to do. And ultimately, I would hope that I would get to do it. Understandably, if it's not possible, I'd like to do other things, like maybe promote the career service more and try and get more mentor schemes. But yeah.
Right, that's good. That's good. So this will be a question to both of you. Why do you think that, sorry, I've got my words mixed up here. What do you think your experiences and skills, hopefully I can cut this, but anyway, I'll say it one last time. Why do you think that your experiences and skills make you an electable activities and development officer? Ciaran, I'm going to start with you this time.
So I've been in a lot of societies, and I know that maybe it's not as involved as being on SOCOM and other things like that, like Morgan's been, and that's really impressive. But I've had my hands-on experience of kind of ground on the ground. Like, I've had my feet on the ground, and I'm constantly talking with people. I'm constantly interacting with other students, other societies, trying to set up mergers, talking to the treasurers of other societies. I think my knowledge of this would help me become a great activities officer, and it would also just make me really appreciate everything that goes on behind the scenes as well. But yeah.
Nice. Morgan, same question.
Thank you. And firstly, Ciaran, thank you for your praise on my experience. It is very much appreciated. So like Ciaran, I also have a very, very grounded background in working on the floor with things. So I have a lot of experience working in our students' union. Just to note a few of the highlights, I've already mentioned that I am your society's counsellor, and this has meant that what would make me electable from this is the fact that I have already actively been representing society's views and concerns at the highest someone's disappeared. The highest decision-making body in our students' union. From this as well, I also see myself as very electable just in this role, just using the experience from this role alone, because this has driven me to really make impact and run independent projects on areas of the SU that I feel need change already. Actually, in this role as well, I campaigned along with another councillor to the Vice Chancellor for Education to really stand up for your rights. So in terms of electability, I would love to get across to students that I really do stand up for what you need and everything when it comes to your concerns as well. In terms of the more practical side of things, what would make me electable? Obviously, I've got my experience as Societies Committee Treasurer. Every single day I am communicating with societies about funding and finance issues. I've also developed a very close relationship with working to see how the Students' Union funding and finance side of things work. And from here as well, I was also your Societies Committee Academic and Departmental Liaison, which meant that I already have a lot of experience in rapidly communicating with students about our Students' Union and getting them heard, promoted and represented at the largest Students' Union Working Committee. In terms of my experience working with societies as well, I was the French Society President. And from here, I was so fortunate to work with the most fantastic team where I set up representative roles, and from here as well, also created new flagship events. I feel that this makes me a very electable candidate because even in the years of experience that I've had, I've never let go from my morals of truly representing students and actually getting their needs heard at the forefront of all of our societies and activities. I too have been involved in mergers. They are such an exciting prospect, and I truly, truly recommend that all societies try and buddy up with other societies to run fantastic events. Everything that I've done has been at the forefront of promoting our societies and students, as well as the funding and finance opportunities to make sure our students feel supported. Something else as well, I think there's an element of the role of activities and development that looks into the events. Now, it's very, very clear that unfortunately we've not been able to have access to our building, but when it comes to electability, I'm very fortunate to already have experience leading and being part of the team that represents one of our largest Students' Union bar crawls called Dance Your Socks Off. I was the events engagement coordinator there, which truly showed my passion and skill for connecting with students and making sure that they truly got what they want out of such a fantastic societies event. Final thing in terms of Students' Union experience, which would make me electable, I was awarded the Best Academic Representative of the Year award. And this is because I actively pioneered change in my department. And I think all of my SU experience in terms of electability encompasses the fact that I will stand up for what students want. I already talk to students on a daily basis about things that concern them. And finally, I will actively represent you at any level, any platform that you would like in our Students' Union. I also think there's a lot of outside university experience that would make me really electable for this role as well. Being in a Students' Union, the Students' Union has honestly been my life. And I could not be more grateful to an organisation that has truly given me the skills and development that I need to go into to feel confident to go into the graduate world. But outside of university, I would also say I'm very electable because I'm a very friendly person. I truly listen to people. I've also been a very figureheading youth and leadership pioneer. So I would say I describe myself as a very strong female leader. And I do strive to empower others in everything that I do, putting other people first and in every element of my work. I've sat on multiple national youth forums. I've been interviewed by multiple media outlets for the importance of youth in our society. And also I was recently awarded one of 40 Global Top Talent Under 25 awards for education. And I was one of 5 in the education category. So what would make me electable from here is that not only am I likable, but I will actually get the job done. Everything that I write on my manifesto, I have a clear plan, clear strategy of how I'm going to implement this and how I'm going to involve students to make sure that their voices are heard and that they are getting everything they want out of our Students' Union. I'm really sorry that was so long.
That's okay. So Ciaran, I'm going to ask you, with the amount of budget cuts made over the past year, how are you planning to fund the charity swap shop initiative? And do you have a contingency plan for the shop in case any COVID-related restrictions are reintroduced?
So obviously we don't know what's going to happen with COVID, and I know that maybe a charity shop is wishing, but at some point next year, we probably will be allowed to have in-person shops. And I mean, I think the shops are opening, is it the 12th of April or around then? Maybe they've even opened before I've not been outside. But we can definitely reimagine the SU space. It's such an exciting time, and we really need to think big. And I think thinking small is just boring, and we should definitely try. Because if we don't try, then we're not going to get anything better than we already have. So I think, obviously, again, it kind of comes back to the SU is definitely in a deficit. It's struggling and it does need help. But if everything turns around, it would be an amazing thing to have. And a charity shop it would be amazing. Like the amount of fast fashion that's like, especially due to COVID, the amount of ASOS bags, man, that I see is ridiculous. Like I know what are you wearing the clothes for? I don't know. But yeah, the fast fashion within the student community, it needs to be tackled, and it is going to be a struggle, and it's going to be hard, and there may not be the funds for it. But if everyone brought in 10, like even just 2 pieces of clothes and just had a swap, like we could use a room, we could use the Octagon, we could use any of the rooms that are available already. We don't necessarily have to repurpose an entire area. If we didn't have the funds, we could just make it a week-long event where we were like, oh, come along, bring some clothes, swap them, maybe try something new, and it'd be an amazing thing.
I just have one follow-up question. We have seen in previous elections multiple people mention about a swap shop, and nothing has ever followed through. And obviously we don't know why this has happened. Would you say why you might be able to get it through more? Is there anything that you could shed on this matter?
I think in terms of that, definitely, it's the reason that it's been said a lot is because it's a good idea. And I'm not exactly, obviously I can't tell you particularly why they've not managed it. All I can say is that I would work with the SU staff to try my best. And like I said, if it doesn't happen, you could literally just use the Octagon, put the stands up, and just invite everyone to bring some clothes. It would be so easy to do, and it wouldn't need as much work as it possibly as it sounds, because it's not that hard to help the environment, and it shouldn't be. So yeah.
Morgan, how are you going to fund the creation of a Sheffield SU UCard app, which you propose will record personal and SU skills for hear, share, accreditation? It's a long word, I can't say that.
Yeah, sorry. No, I completely understand the worries about funding with this. When it comes to the SU budget that we can see on the SU website, there are contingencies in place to allow for student development, and I truly believe that this would be one of the pioneering things that we could do to, put at the forefront of our spending. And this would be fantastic, because I think this would really increase the accessibility of the Students' Union to students as well. I think it would be able to get you access to different areas of the Students' Union as well. But in particular, when it comes to funding this, it does not take a huge amount, or compared to, for example, setting up a swap shop, which is a very admirable idea, I must say. It's very cool. It does not take as much funding to set up as this. And actually, I think this is more widespread, and this will impact more students, both for their employability and their opportunity to empower their own futures and take on board what they want to do, but also for promoting a Step Up Societies campaign that I'm really interested in leading, to put our liberation students at the front. But yes, it's a very valid question about funding. In response to this, there are places in the SU budget that are specifically there to aid student development, and this is not something which would be as costly as some of the other things which candidates have proposed as long-term solutions as well. I've also noticed that quite a few of the candidates previously have said that they want to do this. This is something I'm really passionate about doing, especially coming into the digital world that we have had this year. I think it's really important to keep that accessibility, especially for students who will struggle to access the Students' Union otherwise.
Nice. You did steal my last question. So I'm going to ask a question to both of you. What specific policies would you want to pursue and implement if you're elected that you are quite passionate about? Maybe one specific one. Ciaran, would you go first on this? If not, I've already said, you can say a different one if you've already said so.
So I think it's more of a scheme than a policy, but I really want to start up my activities buddy program. I think it's an amazing idea, and the amount of times I've heard people be like, oh no, I can't go to a society. I don't have anyone to go with. It's such, like, obviously it's terrifying. And I mean, so many people struggle with anxiety. It's a lot, like meeting a room full of 50 people, man, like you can't, like, it's too much sometimes, especially for like people who do struggle a lot with it. So I'd really love to do an activities buddy program and just pair people based on their interests. Like it would work for everyone. Like, it's not even just for first years. Like, obviously first years would benefit so much, but the second years who, like, I know so many second years who just didn't get involved. Like, I didn't get involved until I went to lacrosse and kind of started doing that, and then got involved with other societies. And it's like, once you get that confidence to go to one society, it's like you just enter a world that you've never seen before, and you can just go and just do whatever you want. It's amazing. And I want people to experience that. And like, there's so many people, like fourth years that I talk to are like, yeah, if you had that, I would have joined, like I would have gone. And it's just like Bach rolls, like, especially like, so another example is like non-drinking students. I think there's a quite large non-drinking like following at the Students' Union, and it's difficult. Like, societies are centered around drinking, and it's not, you're not going to eradicate it, like, to be honest. So having this where you've got someone who you can fall back on and kind of talk to and like kind of deal with the peer pressure of drinking, because it's not always like, oh, take this glass. It's not always like, oh yeah, give me a pint and down it, like, yeah, let's go for it. It's more subtlety. It's like, oh, everyone's sat around, everyone's drinking, let's meet at a bar. Like, just having that person you can like hang back with and definitely just stay with, and just, it just makes it so much easier. I think it'd be a brilliant idea. So
nice. Morgan, same question.
Cool. Sorry, my voice. Yes, thank you so much. So I know I've already touched on reforming funding and finances, also showcasing our societies and skills. Although a really big part of my agenda is expanding societies post-COVID accessibility, I know I've touched on this ever so slightly. So the last thing that I really want to talk about is my project. This is my passion project, is tackling inclusions issues in societies. Now, having worked in the forefront of societies and also identifying with multiple liberation groups myself, I truly understand from the lived experiences that I have of being a student going into societies where there is that there could be worries about whether you're going to be accepted for who you are, and worries about how people are going to perceive you and things. I think we can take Ciaran's buddy activities buddy even further. I think it's a good idea, but I think actually in the role of activities development, I could do more with this. And I would do more with this by leading a campaign. Now, historically, I know the activities officers have not led campaigns, but I would want to pioneer the Step Up Societies campaign. And in this, I would want to celebrate our liberation students and international students in our societies, and in particular at the forefront of SU leadership. I also think this is a really active way to break down the barriers that lots of students face when it comes to accessing societies. And through this category of my manifesto as well, I truly believe that something that I can work on very well to help students feel more integrated into societies and more accepted for who they are in our student communities, where we're meant to feel the most at home and truly explore our passions, is by collaborating with students to make societies training. Having a buddy system is good, but at the same time, we need to make sure that our societies and our students feel supported in this. So it's important to build a network. And I think that really we can really build this inclusions and integration network for societies through training and through working with the Students' Union to ensure that all of these are individually looked at, really analysing in depth the training that we are giving to students, and also from there, how taking part in a society and how putting yourself at the forefront of SU leadership can promote you into the world of work. I really think the two of activities and development truly go hand in hand, and this tackling inclusions in societies, real passion project of mine is something that I would be so excited to put into place and finally stamp down on the issues with.
Nice. So these have been your activities and development officer candidates. Over to the pundits.
Hello and welcome to a punditry for the Activities and Development SU officer role. We've just had the debate and now we're going in depth into the candidates' positions. I'm today joined by Ciara, Harry and Rory. Hello all. So before we start, unfortunately, America could not attend the debate, but we wish her luck in her campaign anyway. Okay, so first question is, similarly with sport, now having well-being added to the job's responsibility, Activities and Development Officer has merged to become one. So with the added pressure, what would you say each candidate's key policy is that would lead them to be a success in the office? I'll start with Harry first.
I think for me, a lot of what is riding on and when it comes to societies in terms of the activities side of this office role is how they're going to promote societies again post-COVID. It's been a really tough year for a lot of societies and sports clubs in terms of getting engagement and getting new people to join their societies. I know, for example, the Irish Dance Society had 4 members of its society at the start of this year, and they were all committee members. So, you know, it's really difficult for a lot of societies to gain traction and gain new members during the pandemic. So I think, for example, Morgan's policy of providing more funding to help societies post-COVID and to promote themselves and get more engagement and put on more events, that's going to be a key one, because without societies, there is no point in the activities officer.
Yeah, great. So in terms of the actual debate, there was a little bit sort of, I wouldn't say, but there was slight disagreement, we'll say, with policies when it came to Ciaran and Morgan. So Rory, in terms of the actual policies, how would you say that they differ in a way in terms of what they were saying about in their debates?
Well, like you say, it was quite a good debate, this one, and I think to go back to what Harry has already alluded to, a key part really of this role is going to be getting societies just simply back on their feet again. I know from having been involved myself in societies that we haven't been able to operate in anywhere near the same format and capacity as we would have done had it not been for coronavirus. So quite simply, it's about getting them back on their feet and functioning in the way that we know that they can and should be able to function. But with regarding the main policy difference, I think it's already been said by Harry that Morgan is pushing for increased funding, and as someone, I think her experience probably speaks for itself. She came across very well, and as if she was really cut out for this task and ahead of her, and she has said that the funding is there, and it's just about using it and applying it to the correct areas. I know Ciaran counteracted that, didn't he, by saying that from his experience on, I think it was chemistry suck, correct me if I'm wrong, that he didn't necessarily see that to be the case. And I suppose increased communication is also big with regards to this role, because there are no societies without communications.
Yeah, no, it must be. And in terms of funding and stuff like that, whose policy would you say you agreed more with, Ciara? Would you say that you need the more funding element in terms of what Ciaran was trying to bring to the table, or would you agree with Morgan's?
I feel like they both put budget and funding really high up on their list. I feel like Ciaran did make a particular point of being we do need a new funding system. And I think the fact that Morgan recognised that there already is a platform, she didn't really need to talk more about where the funding is coming from. She talks about transparency. So this idea that students have more of an insight where the money is, where it's going, and also a direction of students gets prioritised where the money is going to go. So I feel like they both really did put funding on a pedestal, but in different ways. And I think they're both effective. But I feel like Morgan did have a bit of a one-up because she has had such an active role as treasurer of SOTCON this year.
Like before, there seemed to be a little bit of tension, we'll say. It wasn't exactly an argument, but it was a different sort of tension with the funding schemes, as we've already spoke about. So the major question is, how big would you say is funding going to be with societies post-pandemic? And how would you say that each candidate's policies tackle the issue this year? If I start with Ciaran.
I feel like there's been some interesting ideas that go around the idea of funding issues. For example, job fairs from Ciaran and reimagining the SU space. So rather than just pumping money into the SU, but also using the space that we have in different ways, such as the swap shop. But then also I quite like Morgan's idea of putting the money that we do have into this idea of the SU app, and you know how the funding is there to develop students, so why not put it into this big idea of the SU app, which we have spoke about before, but how it's important for its accessibility and the amount of students it can help. So I do think there have been either talks about funneling the funding into to one big idea that can help a lot of people, but also using what we have already and reimagining that, like Ciaran. Again, two really interesting points, and I do just think it comes down to personal preference at the end of the day when it comes to voting.
Yeah, and the interesting thing I saw about was how, despite it being an issue for many years and many candidates beforehand saying how they would like to bring in a swap shop, there has still not any implementation for it. So, Rory, in your opinion, could he be the one that could bring in this, or is he another one that's just passing comment in a way?
Well, with swap shops, you know, they're something that have really taken off, I think, in the last 12 months or beyond that, it's safe to say. I mean, how many students do you see on your daily sort of yump about Sheffield who are wearing vintage clothing, and you know, who may be showcasing something which is secondhand or pre-loved, to use a more politically correct term. So no, I think the idea of a swap shop is at the forefront, and it's something that a lot of people would like to see implemented. Again, it's something which, you know, will depend heavily on resources. These sorts of things require staff, and staff don't just appear out of thin air. It is, you know, human beings who have got to put their time into it. But not to deter too much away from the idea of swap shops, something I thought was interesting, if I can say it, just in the two policies and the differences, that Morgan is advocating for a whole new app, which she calls the SU app, or the U-card app, which would essentially have all of your resources into one place. So that's things like hearing, accreditation, maybe exam results, and your timetable, even going as far as that. And I know that, speaking from experience, that's something I think would be beneficial moving forward. It can be quite frustrating when your uni materials are all in, you know, 1,000,001 places, it can feel like. Then on the flip side, Ciaran has advocated just for a continuation and I suppose a refurbishment of the pre-existing iSheffield app. So that's something to maybe to keep an eye on going forward, whether, you know, we move away from the system, which I don't think is broken, and there's that old saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But certainly, I think she has a case with.
Yeah, no, it's been clearly a big issue. I didn't mean to cut you off, and sorry, it's just we
not at all. No, you're okay.
And yeah, well, Morgan's obviously spoken a lot about the vast amount of experience she's had with the Society's counsellor this year, as well as numerous other roles. And you've obviously mentioned before about the Sheffield app needing a revamp. So Harry, would you say that could this be a massive policy in terms of who people would pick? Because realistically, if you can get a place that stores all of your experiences, all of your skills, all of your sort of university apps all in one place, big point in terms of who people vote for, couldn't it?
So I don't feel like the app policy should be that big of a decision maker between these two, because having an SU app has been something that's been a policy for presidents since Jake Verity 2 years ago. And it's something that just hasn't been possible and hasn't been able to be produced. Ciaran's idea of revamping an already existing iSheffield app so that is more society friendly is probably the more realistic of the two. So if you really want an app on your phone that's going to help you be up to date with your societies and your society events, then realistically, Ciaran's policy is the one that's more likely going to be for you, because creating an SU app is difficult and it's been promised essentially for the last 2 years, and it's still yet to materialize. So I feel, in terms of an SU app, that's not a big policy for me, and neither is revamping the Sheffield app. But if it was important to you, that's the one that's more realistic.
Yeah, no, massively. And like you said, with the app, there's a sort of expectancy of, again, that if it's got to take some time and some work to implement, it's going to be another cost, and countless times. There's just not that money available. And realistically, if you were to bring in that app, it would take time, it would take money, and realistically, maybe the university won't look at it as a policy that they need to implement. So in terms of the other policies, how would you see Morgan's policy sort of shaping out in a way, Ciara?
Well, there are a lot of policies to choose from with Morgan, to be fair, and I do feel like there are some from both candidates that you could implement without necessarily like a funding strain. One of them being educational leadership training that would be key to developing students, and as well as this is kind of quite similar, I thought, the inclusions issues, like the hashtag step up societies. So like taking Ciaran's idea as well, it's quite similar with the buddy program, the activities buddy program, which I thought was really useful. And again, I don't think it'd be too much of a drain of funding. So both, again, we see these ideas of inclusion training and funding that won't cost too much, but again, just to help people feel more included within their SU, and again, help their development at the same time.
Yeah, massively. And as Ciara mentioned, Ciaran's, you can obviously see that he's very passionate about an inclusive SU in terms of a lot of his policies, such as the extending this girl can scheme into activities and not just sport. That's a key area that he wants to look at, as well as the buddy system, as Ciara previously said. So in terms of creating an inclusive SU, it's all well and good, but would these policies actually work in practice, or is it just something that sounds good on a manifesto? What's your opinion on that, Rory?
I think it's notable that he talks about life lessons, and something that certainly wasn't offered to me moving between school and university was that idea that, you know, there's more to life than academia. And you know, I think all too often we get ourselves into this kind of trap, this like vicious circle of, you know, eat, sleep, repeat. And particularly at the moment, it can feel very much like that's the case. So, you know, again, it's something that maybe wouldn't have the uptake that he would require for it to kind of, you know, prove viable. But certainly, I think, you know, his idea around life lessons is something that could benefit a lot of people going into the world of work, because it's a big jump and it's a transition that there's probably not enough made about the fact that, you know, 1 minute you're a student with all of these services available to you, and then just like that you're out on your own on the limb, so to speak. But whoever takes on this role has got a tough act to follow. I thought Joel Kirk, you know, again, under the circumstances, I feel like we're repeating ourselves here, but he had a lot to deal with, and I think he might have it pretty commendably as well. But activities is absolutely crucial to everything that not just the SU, but everything that the uni do.
Yeah, no, massively. And in terms of like the SU as a whole, and again, the inclusivity and all that stuff, would either of Harry or Ciara, if the sort of the schemes that Ciaran has been sort of promising, right, if he would implement if he came in, would you say that would sort of make you want to go look at new societies and think, ooh, maybe if I've got someone who can help me out, or someone that may sort of like a buddy system, he says, if they were there to sort of to teach you along and bring you along and see and show you how to learn the ropes and all that stuff, would you say that's a sort of policy that would sway you towards voting Ciaran? Because I know Morgan as well has said about how she would look for a bigger scheme of more than just a buddy system and more of an in-depth sort of way. So would you say that's sort of a policy that could sway the voting in a way? Harry or Ciara, whoever wants to take it.
I feel like that the activities buddy system would be like catch a lot of people's attention. I feel like there's, especially first and second years, bear in mind that they wouldn't have had that one-to-one interaction with people that because of COVID. I think they'll be really nervous going into this new year. And I mean, I know from personal experience going to events, I'd like to have a friend with me because it is just really scary and daunting going into a room with people you've never met before. So I do feel like literally, like, even just how simple activities buddy system, it's kind of, it does what it says on the tin. And I think that will draw a lot of people's attention, and it's a bit more clear cut perhaps towards what inclusion, like tackling inclusion might mean. So I do feel like that will be a policy that will draw a lot of attention.
And just to go on to it, obviously with the new implementation of it, obviously spoke a lot about the social societies and how big of an influence that has on the SU. But looking at the policies, they've obviously got a lot of passion for their career services, with Ciaran mentioning the importance of jobs fairs and Morgan wanting to include employability workshops. So for both candidates, how would you say that their policies could actually be successfully implemented in a post-COVID world, so that all the students have the same opportunities and have the actual accessibility in a way of looking at careers and potentially sort of finding a job they want in a way with the help of a wellbeing and activities officer? So I'll go to Harry first.
I wouldn't say I'm particularly knowledgeable in how their policies would be implemented, but I would say that any changes and expansions they do make to the careers services and job services involved in the university have got to be publicised. People have got to know that those services are available to them in order for whatever changes they make to be useful, because people have to use the service for it to be useful. So I do think, you know, from both their policies of increasing support, increasing training, and different sorts of policies along the same lines, revolving around these job things, I'm not sure how they would be implemented. They all of them, at least. I don't know how all they would all be implemented, but they just need to make sure that anything they do is known to be available.
And just to round off this debate before we have to finish off, Rory, in terms of, like I said, with the employment and stuff like that, how important will communication be in this coming year with the post-COVID world, trying to find the careers service and having that support there? So would you say that, in your opinion, who would be better suited for that in terms of Morgan or Ciaran, in your opinion?
Well, it's huge, and I don't think, as far as careers and employability is concerned, there's a risk that you can be hit with too much information at times. I know my inbox is currently flooded with things regarding next year, and it can be a lot to process, and sometimes less is more when it comes to employability. And I think the onus again is on the individual to go and actively search, because no one's going to hand you a job on the plate. It's as simple as that. But you're right in saying that communication is key, and I think, you know, all too often maybe opportunities pass people by because simply they haven't heard about them or they haven't been informed that they're eligible for something. I think we're in a moment now where social media is such a big part of everyday life, and there's no better place, as far as I can see, than to advertise careers fairs and so on, and things like masterclasses, webinars, then on Twitter, then on Facebook, on Instagram. You know, if it takes going on to TikTok, then so be it. Go where the youth are based, and almost reach out to them on their level, on which, you know, for all those reasons that I've just stated, I feel like Morgan probably has the more well-rounded picture and kind of philosophy surrounding employability. But that isn't to say that Ciaran's talk of careers fairs, you know, whether they be in person, because let's be honest, this pandemic is on the way out, like Harry says, and I'm no scientist, but you have to hold on to what little hope that there is, and you know, and for as much as as much as you can, look to plan things face to face in the not too distant future.
So thank you once again for my guests for today. We're now going back to the studio where Michael Johnson has a big one. It's a president's debate. The candidates are ready, so let's see the debate.
Hello, my name is Michael Johnson. This is Forge TV, and you're watching the Welfare and Sustainability Officer debate. Here with us today are Marta, Marlowe, Ness, Marcin, and Ray. So firstly, I'm going to start off with a question to you all. What do you view the purpose of this role as being, and what do you think makes a good welfare and sustainability officer? Marta, would you start?
Yeah, so I actually sit on Student Union Council, and I was on a group of councillors that suggested this role be the shape that it is. And essentially the thinking behind that was that welfare and sustainability, because of its responsibility for housing, for workers' rights, for sustainability action, which includes social justice actions, because we have to remember that sustainability isn't just about the environment. I think this is a perfect position. It's essentially the epitome of climate justice and fighting for everyone to have access to the basics such as safe housing conditions and a good job with fair pay.
Nice. Ness, can you go next?
I suppose obviously we would be in term next year, sort of coming 2021 to 2022. And given that, I think the purpose of this role, especially within that period, there's so many purposes beyond it, but in that time period, COVID has sort of impacted both people and planet. And I think unlike a lot of the council roles, this one particularly focuses on both equally and focuses on people in terms of how you can better them in their employability, in terms of their rent, the sort of core issues that everyone faces. And then equally, it also sort of focuses on, like Marta was saying, the broader sense of sustainability, the completely holistic from environmental to social justice issues. And I think the purpose of this role is both to champion and protect people and planet. And what you said, what's needed for this role, I think it's just passion for those two equally, a passion to sort of do what's in the best interest for both.
Nice, nice. Marcin?
Yeah, hello, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, so I believe the welfare and sustainability link really well together because it's fighting for not only people, but the sustainability of the whole planet. And obviously people live on the planet. So I think those two things go really well together. Fighting for both people's rights as well as what I believe is the planet's rights is something that goes really well together. I believe what you need for this role is compassion to both help the people and help the planet as well.
Nice. Ray, next.
Hi, I would say that I think this role is massively about making sure that everything in our university experience outside of academia almost is looked after. So like our mental well-being and making sure that we are comfortable in our university in all those different areas. So in where we're living, how we're feeling in of ourselves and who we are, and exploring those things as we come to uni and find ourselves. So I think what makes a really good officer in this respect is massively having compassion, is caring about other people, and wanting the best for everybody here to have an equal opportunity, as well as being really motivated to care about the university's future as an institution, how it's sustainable and how it sets a precedent for everybody else to follow along.
Nice. Marlowe?
Yeah, I can't help but agree with what everyone said, but I would add that I think that because university is such a big part of students' lives, there's a responsibility for the SU and the university to kind of hold students in a more holistic way than just education. And I think what the welfare and sustainability officer role is part of holding people to account to and expanding services and making sure that all these different things from housing to the environment, it's quite an all-encompassing role, and that students can have the best experience and not be let down in those areas.
Nice, nice. So now I'm going to go to some single questions. So Ness, which elements of the SU's current sustainability movement would you like to continue, and how would you like to build upon it?
So currently I'm a member of the Sustainability Committee, and we've been working hard in terms of education for sustainable development. I think it's quite a new term, and it's one that perhaps people, when they initially think of, they think it's quite climate related. And I think one of the areas I'm quite keen, and one of the areas I think sets me apart from other candidates, is that I've actually put this as a priority in my manifesto. I think it's something that probably all these candidates are passionate about, and will, if they sort of got the position, would campaign for it as well. But I've sort of been in these working groups already. I've seen what the university's doing, and they're doing amazing work, but the way in which the university works, it can be quite bureaucratic. And sometimes I just don't think it's moving fast enough. So that's why I think if I were sort of to be elected, I do want to supercharge it a bit more and push it a bit forward, because at the end of the day, when we're graduating from university, we should be equipped with the skills and knowledge of how to tackle these issues that we're also passionate about, like be it economic, environmental, or social. And yeah, I suppose that's one area of the strategy that I sort of really want to continue and push forward.
Nice. Marta, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly make a point, because Ness mentioned that she's the only candidate who put that in her manifesto. I didn't put it in my manifesto because I'm very aware of the work that's being done kind of behind the scenes, and the fact that the university is leaning towards employing students as interns for departments to champion this work, which is fantastic and absolutely great. And I didn't want to essentially piggyback off something that's already happening, which is why I focused more on bringing sustainability education beyond the courses in more of a student culture kind of way.
That's nice. Marcin, openly accessible fridges are an exciting approach to lowering food waste, but coming out of a pandemic, some may struggle to warm to the idea. How will you ensure that they are well maintained, and how will you promote their usage to students who may still be concerned about the spread of disease?
Right, so that is a very good question, because obviously if the pandemic is still at its peak, this idea not necessarily can go into full flourishing, because obviously students will not be able to interact with the students in the shop as they would usually would. The part of the idea is things that are about to go bad, students will be able to take at the end of the day. Obviously this is going to have to, with the pandemic in mind, it's going to have to be a very maintained area. Maybe set aside a role where someone is trying to keep this a very maintained area, because obviously with the pandemic, you 100% not know. So I don't necessarily have a full answer to this question, because you never know what's going to be in the future when it comes to regard of pandemic. You'd never know how comfortable people are going to be. You never know what's going to happen, basically.
Speaking of the pandemic, Marlowe, you mentioned for fighting for a safety net in your manifesto. Do you think this issue will still be relevant to students in the 2021-22 academic year as we hopefully get out of it, or are you pursuing to try get it for this year?
Well, I think it will be important for, firstly, kind of postgrad students who may be finishing in September and need that taken into account for their grades. But I think it would go alongside with the grades adjustment for people who may have performed worse during the pandemic and trying to reweight their future grades when we're in less strange times, I guess. So I think I would, on balance, go with what seemed most appropriate for the most amount of people. That would be an aspect of how I would kind of repair the damage that COVID has caused and the stress that it's caused.
Nice. Ray, a drop in mental health service may have been a real help to a lot of students, especially through this pandemic, but it would cost a lot. How would you encourage the university to finance a drop in mental health service?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, a lot of my campaign is going for these mental health things, which will involve, not all of it, but most of it will involve lobbying for more funding. And I think it's just massively important to stress to the university how vital this is. to their students. I don't know if you saw the Guardian article this morning, but Edinburgh University have just had to admit massive failures because one of their students unfortunately took their own life because they were not giving help. They were not receiving help, from their university. And I think expressing to them to our university, that many students feel like that could be them, and that there is no price we can put on the well-being of our students. It is the most important thing we can possibly do. And unless the university wants to follow suit and be making apologies for somebody else's life, I think it's really important that they give that funding too.
That's great. That's great. Speaking of funding again, Marta, obviously funding is always going to be there with most questions, but you mentioned about the idea of a life skills course. Many students, I believe, would definitely get back behind that, but do you think funding will pose a barrier to get this started, and who would run them?
Right, so I didn't suggest that policy as something that the university would have to implement, putting their own funding into it. I think this is something that should be coordinated with the SU staff, and it should come from SU officers as representative of students who work with working representative committees and the liberation officers that will be coming into office as well. So I think it would be based within the services that we already have and within the pay, the salaries that we already pay people to basically do this work.
Nice. So as Ray mentioned also, this question will be a question to you all. There's been many concerns raised in a lot of your manifestos about the university's mental health provision. What issues, if any, do you feel persist most strongly in university mental health provision, and how can these be amended? Marlowe, may you start that? Oh, well, I'll just pick
wait, it's fine.
Yeah, Marlowe, would you start?
Yeah, so I think something that anecdotally I've heard a lot is that the current provisions often leave people kind of falling through the cracks, where either they're kind of doing too well to have access more kind of serious like mental health interventions, but or maybe too unwell to access university ones. But then obviously during the pandemic there's been a huge strain on the NHS, and everyone knows like the waiting lists and things for therapy and can be really like long and exhausting. And I think there's a lot of kind of stopgap measures that the university is doing, but not necessarily kind of more long-term things that need to follow you through your journey at university. So I would say that would be cementing the mental health provisions so they're more longer term and also cover more students, so it's not a case of you're too unwell or you're too well. I think that would be my priority.
Nice. Marta, same question.
Yeah, echoing what Marlowe has said about there kind of being this weird gap where sometimes you feel like you're not unwell enough to ask for help, or you're at a point where you need to seek more urgent care than what the university provides. And I think a massive part of reducing the stigma that still is there very much around mental health is when students come to university, actually introduce them to the service that we have, because I don't think that's done at all, to be honest. And students very often just go on 3, 4, 5, however long the courses are, years at uni, not really knowing what's available to them. And I also think it's really important that we kind of look at it from a perspective that is generally very toxic in academia, this hustle culture situation, and everyone who goes into academia kind of further beyond their undergraduate degrees definitely suffers with this, with the kind of imposter syndrome and the current, this constant like, go, you have to do everything and possibly not be paid, sit on all of these diversity committees. So I think it's really important that we kind of try and address the root of that and where that comes from as well, from the first day that students come to university as part of their induction into their courses.
Yes. Ness, same question.
Sorry, would you mind repeating the question again?
Yeah, no, that's completely fine.
Slip my mind through.
That's fine. So the question was, I've got to find where I put it. There have been some concerns raised across your manifestos about the university's mental health provision. What issues do you feel persist most strongly in university mental health provision, and how can these issues be amended?
I think for years and years, if you look at candidates who've run, I think it's quite hard to find a year where mental health has not been brought up. It's something we as students, we face personally, and something we know for years that this is an issue and that it needs fixing. There's funding issues in the USC, there's lack of support. Marlowe mentioned people slipping through the cracks. Marta mentioned these root causes. And I think it's so hard to identify one thing. I think everyone has experiences, everyone knows it's an issue. And I think as being the role of a welfare and sustainability officer, specifically welfare, is sort of focused on those root issues, sort of issues that perhaps don't tackle mental health directly, but it's working at those core issues that when you tackle those, you can help to alleviate it. And it's not to say that people will not struggle with mental health because it's so multifaceted. But I think if you sort of look at it as a tree, the role we're going for is very much focused on those root issues, sort of like accommodation issues, employability issues, health issues. And by tackling that, you can hope to alleviate some of the mental health issues that the activities and wellbeing officer, for example, they perhaps are more in tune with mental and physical wellbeing, whereas we are more in tune with the root issues. And I think that's perhaps one thing that's achieved from this referendum, and sort of attacking mental health at multiple different angles in order to come to these solutions.
Marta just said agree 100%. Marcin, do you have anything to say?
I think all candidates kind of went in with all the right things to say. I think that the gaps is a big thing. I think the roots is a big thing. I think also one thing that I might want to add is that there isn't necessarily a service for people that there is a lot of services, a lot of information out there. Some people that are struggling for certain issues might find it hard to actually go out and find those answers, might feel uncomfortable to reach out for help, might feel uncomfortable to go through the formal processes. Sometimes you have to go through, getting ping-ponged around kind of thing, you don't fit this group, you don't fit that group. I think this sometimes raises the problem where students sometimes that are struggling might find it difficult to ask for help, even when they need it the most. I think possibly a service might want to be implemented where it cuts down on that whole process. I'm not going to go into it, but one of my policies is to try and make it a single click where help comes to you instead of you having to reach out as much as you would have to sometimes. But I think all the candidates raised really good points, as always.
Obviously, a lot have been said, but Ray, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I really agree with a lot of what's been said. I think the idea about people slipping through the cracks is so important. I do also really agree with the idea that we need to build from the roots up so that the problems that are causing mental health problems are alleviated, but also to recognise that some mental health is caused by nothing. It is just chemical imbalance. I have been there myself. I've been through the university health service, and somebody who's experienced it firsthand, I think that the main problems our particular facilities have is that it's just not as accessible as it should be. The waiting times are far too long to receive any help. I have friends who've waited months. People could have really gotten so much worse in that time. And I also think it's quite hard to register at the moment. I think as somebody who, if you're really, really struggling, you have to sign up with like the SAMS registration process, and you get there and you think, I don't have the energy to do that, or you might think, oh, I'm not bad enough to be registered. And I think we need a much easier way to be able to express that we're struggling. I think the one-click process is absolutely a wonderful policy, and then to actually be able to receive that help quickly and not have to wait weeks before any action's being taken.
So I'll go to some specific questions now again. Ness, which employability tools would you aim to offer to COVID alumni, and what support would you hope to give them?
I think one of the main tools is first of all, the career service does offer, it has so many skills and so much knowledge. I do want to applaud it for everything it has. I just think, one, it's not advertised enough, and two, it's not prepared for COVID alumni. And I think in that, I mean, you do need to cater for specific needs. So the service offers, like, you can have career support and career one-to-one once you've graduated for, I think, like up to 3 years. However, graduating now, I think it would be so useful to have subject-specific one-to-one conversations. The job market has changed greatly, and I feel as though people within the industry or people within research in that industry sort of are perhaps slightly more in tune and can give you slightly more specific advice that could perhaps be more beneficial than somebody who's trained in careers, which is still useful and is still valid because they're invested in that. But I think to supplement that alongside it, it would be so useful if it did offer perhaps one-to-one subject-specific mentoring. Additionally, I think going off mental health as well, graduates are struggling so much currently with everything they're facing, and perhaps just having a video campaign, something that doesn't require a lot of funding, but the impact is still so important, of how to do your taxes, how to balance work and life, how not to feel demotivated when you've applied for a job 1,000 times. And just things like this, I think, are sort of what's needed for the alumni.
Nice. Marcin, so following the pandemic, do you think it would be difficult to amass the funding to run a sustainability week? If so, how do you intend to get around this issue?
So obviously the original idea of the sustainability week is to have a big event, almost like kind of like a festival for sustainability. With COVID permitted, with the funding issues and stuff, obviously if we are not allowed to be in Students' Union, this will be turned to more of like an online event where I think majority of the things can still go through. I think a lot of information events can go through. Obviously, it'll be a bit unfortunate if pandemic does stop it, because I think it's quite a good idea to kind of like join the student union into one big good cause. However, if pandemic obviously is still a thing, it might unfortunately be a bit hindered, but I think it can still be great. I think we can have a lot of activities online, a lot of information events. It's the whole point of the sustainability week is to inspire others to try something more sustainable. And I think we can do that through information events, maybe online calls, maybe some lectures, online lectures. I think it can still possibly go through if pandemic is still.
Okay. Ray, what would a fair trial system for offering extenuating circumstances entail?
That's a great question. I'd have loved to have gone into more detail about this on my manifesto, but the word count is just quite limiting. But yeah, so anyone who's gone through the extenuating circumstances process knows that basically you have to submit a form to your department, it is looked at, and they decide whether or not your case gives you the right to have sort of an extension or your grade reassessed or your things re-looked at. But I think that there is a mass inconsistency in how that is treated. Myself, I came from a dual studies undergraduate. I had to fill in these forms, and I noticed a massive difference between the ways that my two departments, treated my circumstances. One was absolutely outstanding, the other was a lot more difficult, and I worried that I wasn't actually going to get given the extensions I really needed at the time. And I think there's certain departments that have a reputation for being even worse with that. I was lucky that I still got mine granted, but I think students deserve an opportunity to have a fair trial, that if they have been rejected for those the help that they need, they have someone to go to and say, look, I don't think this is fair, and they can go and be heard, perhaps by a jury of a mixture of students and staff, and say, okay, do you really think this is the full situation? I think I deserve this kind of help, please will you give it to me? And that it's fairly assessed and everyone's given an equal chance, and it's not just decided by a department that might not be as compassionate as a different department.
Nice. Marlowe, where do you think the current accreditation system for landlords is lacking, and how do you aim to improve it?
I'd say the first thing was that I hadn't heard of it until I started writing my manifesto. I think when I was kind of asking people around it, people, my friends basically that I was asking said, oh yeah, like it says that this letting agency is really great, but I rented with them and they were really awful. So I think kind of updating it, and then you know, with a lot of things like housing and finance, everyone likes a bit of a carrot and a stick approach of nobody wants bad reviews, everyone wants probably a nice little sticker or something that makes them feel like they're doing something right. And I think it would be really helpful to students to be able to kind of see that this kind of system was being maintained and it wasn't like something from a few years ago, and that these things, there would be sufficient kind of reason for landlords and letting agencies to keep up their good attributes. Yeah.
Nice. This will be my last question to Marta. Sorry about time. We're more candidates, so you don't have as much time. But so, Marta, at the end of your manifesto, you make a quick statement about rewilding our university. Could you give a brief overview of what this means and what in the university it would entail?
Yeah, so I come from a science background. I'm a biologist. So taking care of the biodiversity is really, really close to my heart. That's something I spent a lot of time learning at uni. And to be honest, looking at campus and looking at the facilities that we have, everything being covered in concrete or asphalt or lawns that don't support biodiversity, because the flowers that we have next to the gym, they look great, but they're not there to support the insects we need to essentially keep the life on the planet going. And I really think we need to kind of reassess what we see as kind of tidy and nice, and how the university kind of presents itself, because it's not just about everything being like cut down right so that the grass is just there for people to look at it. I think it's really important that we kind of take into account that we're so close to a national park and that there is a lot of biodiversity around the city, and I think it would benefit people well-being massively if we actually reintroduced some of this biodiversity into spaces around the city region.
Nice. So these have been your welfare and sustainability officers. Back to the pundits.
Hi, I'm Jemma Snowdon and I'm here with Tianzi Liu and Gwyn Roberts, and we're discussing the candidates for the student union officer role of the welfare and sustainability. All 5 candidates seem pretty passionate about the role. Was there anyone who stood out for you in particular?
Yeah, I'll start. So I think Ness really stand out from the crowd. So firstly, I just want to stress that when I'm looking at a welfare and sustainability officer's role, I think the ability that I'm trying to look for in all the candidates is the ability to efficiently allocate time, energy, and the resources. I think that is crucial for this role, because arguably this is an all-encompassing role that has to tackle all issues from mental well-being, housing, employability to the environment. There's just so many to be done, and in a term of office as little as 1 year. So I'm really looking for someone who she has to, or he or they has to be the person who has a clear goal and the ability to prioritize tasks. And Ness stand up to me not only because she is she's part of the university's Education for the Sustainable Development Plan, which is ESD. She has experience working with the university, and she wants to supercharge this movement. But also that I think it's really smart that when she was trying to navigate her strategy in terms of targeting mental health issue, she recognized that the reality is every person is different. We all have different problems, and what she wants to tackle is the root issues, about accommodation and housings. From there, she think maybe it doesn't help to tackle the issues directly, but it helps to eliminate to reduce the amount of stress and anxieties in students. So yeah, I think she has a very realistic ideas towards the multifaceted reality of mental health.
Yeah, Gwyn, do you have anything to say about it?
Yeah, I agree with you with what you said about Ness, but I also think Marta, with the especially sustainability part, looking at the future, obviously after university, quite hard for finding jobs, and especially at the moment. And she talked about working with citywide networks to bring work experience opportunities, give them the experience, give them the opportunities, support the university also in producing ethical grad jobs. She was explaining about not enough investment currently. So I guess calling for that funding will help as well. And I felt she seemed like somebody who'd work tirelessly to make sure that all these solutions would come about, and students after university will be supported and will be put in a good place to go towards the future.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, Marta, she's quite kind of, I think she stands out as well because, she's part of the student council and she is part of the team that actually behind the change of this role. They realize that the meaning or the function about this role is not only about the environment, it's also about housing sustainability, education sustainability. So I think she has a very deep understanding of what's happening behind the scene in the universities department. I agree with you.
You mentioned, sorry.
What did you think of Marcin's sustainability week idea? Like, do you think that goes far enough, or do you think there's more that he can do? Anyone can answer.
Do you want me to start first?
Yeah, go on then.
Yeah. So in terms of Marcin, I think, one thing that really surprised me is that he actually proposed a very detailed idea of how to reduce waste. For example, he mentioned that, he wants to set up this kind of openly accessible fridges in the SU to reduce the waste. And I think that's a quite smart idea. It's just the concern is, whether students will be warm to the idea of using that in the public space because of the the whole pandemic thing. And I also think that he struck me because his honesty. So I remember she was asked about the question, whether this is feasible, whether this idea is, do you think it's will be a problem? And he's very honest about the question that he doesn't have a full answer for. And I think that's really important, in our candidates. You can't be a person who knows everything. So that tells me that he's a very reasonable person who just want to find the right solutions.
Yeah, I think Martin, with his combination of he's quite clear on combining welfare and sustainability and getting them both. And he, I thought on the welfare side gave a good with the mental health, talking about the easy single-click access, making it more accessible to everyone. As obviously, as we all know, at the moment with COVID, mental health is such a massive thing, and I felt like he gave that and then also provided solutions for the sustainability side, which I think is quite important.
Yeah, mental health seemed to be a common theme across the board, really, amongst all of the candidates. There also seemed to be a theme of like making that process a bit quicker for people and making that just in general easier to access for people that don't necessarily have extreme problems, but for the people that are sort of in the middle. What did you think of the idea of like a one-click service? Do you think that was realistic?
I think it would make. Not sure how realistic, but I think if it came about, it would be really important because, like a few of them said, it's not very like the solutions, the options, and the resources aren't always explicitly shown to people, so they're not aware of all these of where to go. And I think so many people struggle with mental health and don't do anything about it. And yeah, like I said earlier, like especially at the moment, I think a lot of people would be lying if they didn't say that they've had times when they've struggled. So obviously, some more than others. And like they mentioned about, I think it was Marlowe said that people like fall between the cracks, like maybe too well to go to like official like mental health like intentions, but others are possibly too well to use the university mental health resources. Yeah, so I think need to like make it more aware, and see a single click access would be a lot more accessible.
Yeah, Tansy, what do you think of like this idea in comparison to Marlowe's revamping of the counselling service? I know she had the idea of, in her manifesto, of just increasing the amount of therapies available. What did you think of that?
Well, one thing that we have to realize that both of these ideas requires massive funding to support, and that is something that's constantly being brought up during the the conversation, the debate. I just to echo Gwyn's point, I think he mentioned one point that's really important, that there's a crack between people who doing really well to not be able to to not really require any serious services, between the people who are doing really unwell and not not having the courage or any sort of other sort of factors that stopping them from accessing that kind of service. So a click, an easily clickable solution, that sounds to me is it sounds like a perfect idea. I'm just worried about the the accusation of that idea. Where are you going to place it, and exactly how you're going to carry out, and how do you advertise this kind of easily clickable solution to the students who really need it. In terms of Marlowe's idea, I think she mentioned that making the service accessible for all, and what really struck me is that she mentioned the safety net policy for postgraduate students, that remind us that officer, you have to look at all students at the university, not just undergraduate students. So having that kind of awareness of we need to cater our services to all students, not just undergraduate, not just postgrad, and maybe PhD students. That is brilliant.
Another thing that came up as well, understandably, was how the university plans to transition for life after COVID. I think Ness had his idea about helping COVID alumni. Gwyn, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think it's very important because, like I said, I think at the moment, especially, it's hard to get a job after leaving